Imagine this: a young Brazilian star, hyped as the next big thing, moves to Europe with the world at his feet. But instead of glory, he faces crushing pressure, unrealistic expectations, and a media frenzy ready to call him a flop at the first misstep. Sound familiar? It's the story of so many Brazilian talents, and now, with Vitor Roque's move to my beloved Palmeiras from Barcelona, it's something that made its way back into the spotlight. So, I thought I might as well unpack what I believe to be some of the reasons behind this recurring phenomenon by examining the stories of a few highly talented Brazilian players who were hyped due to their talent and potential, but who have stumbled when taking the next step outside of Brazilian football. Adapting to a whole new culture and a different language is a challenge that many can easily understand. For Brazilian players, it can often be the main parameter that plays a hand on whether they're able to find success in European shores or go home years later with nothing but disappointment to show for it. Such was the case with Kleberson, who had carved his name in the history books after coming into his own during the 2002 World Cup that saw Brazil lift the trophy and become the first ever 5-time FIFA World Cup champions. In the aftermath of that World Cup, Kleberson became Manchester United's first ever Brazilian signing at £6 million. He was introduced in the same transfer window as Cristiano Ronaldo, and for one Sir Alex Ferguson, he was seen as the replacement for Juan Sebastian Veron after he went to Chelsea. But as mentioned by Kleberson in an interview with Daniel Taylor for The Athletic, those were challenging times. He didn't speak the language at his arrival, Manchester isn't exactly a hub for Portuguese speakers, and to add on to those woes, he dislocated his shoulder in his second ever game for the Red Devils against Southampton. Even after returning from injury, he continued to struggle to adapt to the physicality and pace of the Premier League, and only went on to make 20 appearances for Manchester United over 2 seasons before he left for Besiktas in Turkey in 2005. His time with the Turkish Giants was equally chaotic, as injuries and inconsistency in play continued, and after the 2006-2007 season, Kleberson unilaterally terminated his contract with Besiktas after claiming the club failed to pay his wages on time. He would eventually return to Brazil to play for a few years at Flamengo, Atlético Paranaense, and Bahia before trying his luck in the United States for his final years as a player. While a great player who contributed immensely to Brazil's 5th World Cup while still playing at Atlético Paranaense, Kleberson struggles to adapt to a new environment, combined with injuries and a lack of consistent playing time, ended up derailing his career in Europe. Another example of a young Brazilian player who was unable to adapt to his new environment and all of the changes that came with it was Wellington Silva. Although the circumstances that led to his pitfalls were quite different compared to Kleberson. He had been scouted early on in his youth career by Arsenal, and the English club paid close to £4 million to Fluminense after seeing the then 15-year-old Wellington put 4 goals past Norwich's U16 team. Due to FIFA's Article 19 regulation, Arsenal wouldn't be able to formally sign Wellington until his 18th birthday. Prior to that date, the youngster fell out of favor with Fluminense's manager Mauricio Ramalho. He didn't play as many games with the club, and his work permit ended up being rejected by the time he turned 18. Due to circumstances, Arsenal had no choice but to send him on loan through continental Europe in order for him to gain enough experience to qualify for a work permit. During those loans, he spent his time stationed between 5 different Spanish teams in just 4 years, and through those years, Wellington has gone on record in an interview with The Athletic about how he had trouble sleeping during the early days of his loans, and he had also been criticized by local media and his own coach El Levante while on loan about his lack of professionalism. An incident in which Wellington tweeted his frustrations about his lack of playing time being the catalyst, something that he did after being told by the club to stop spending so much time on social media. While Wellington Silva eventually did spend enough time in Spain to qualify for a European passport and gain his work permit after 4 long years, he never ended up featuring for Arsenal's senior team. He was instead loaned to EFL Championship side Bolton Wanderers, and sold back to Fluminense the following year at age 23. His career since has been mostly in Brazil, with a few stints in Japan, China, and Saudi Arabia in recent years. Wellington's story shows that a big move to Europe at a young age can be a gamble, and in his situation, a combination of bad luck and a struggle to adapt to new surroundings ended up impeding his development, and with it, he returned home from Europe without living up to expectations and with nothing to show in terms of accolades. However, adaptability to new surroundings and the isolation that comes with it is only one of the many challenges that Brazilian players who move abroad have faced. When a Brazilian prospect dazzles the stage in a manner that is otherworldly, more often than not, labels tend to get thrown around. You know the ones. Things like, he's the next Pelé, or that kid's going to be better than R9. The immense weight that comes with those labels, expectations, and having to carry that as a young player moving through the youth ranks of their initial clubs in Brazil to moving abroad with those expectations can be an anchor that sinks them into the abyss. One of the more recent examples of a high-profile young player who was unable to match the weight of the expectations set for him in Europe was Gabriel Barbosa, better known to many as Gabigol. Many felt his chances to live up to the expectations of being Brazil's next biggest prospect since Neymar were realistic, as the young forward had been fast-tracked from Santos' academy to the first team at the age of just 16 and helped the club win the 2015 and 2016 Campeonato Paulista editions, along with being the leading scorer for the Peixe in the Copa do Brasil for 3 consecutive years. His goal-scoring prowess across all competitions in Brazil got the attention of various teams in Europe, from then unlikely Premier League champions Leicester City to Spanish giants Barcelona. But eventually, the man known as Gabigol would put pen to paper on a professional contract which contained a buyout clause of 50 million euros for Italian Serie A giants Inter Milan. His introduction to the I Nerazzurri in September of 2016 was an incredible show in its own right, as Gabriel Barbosa entered the press room after a video showing him below the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro and then on Milan rooftops, clearly evoking the same introduction spot that Inter Milan had used to introduce Ronaldo Fenomeno in the past. Although for all of the pomp and circumstance, Gabigol's entire saga didn't live up to the hype and success that initially happened in Brazil. Being used to being the lone striker, he wasn't going to immediately usurp Mauro Icardi at the time of arrival, and thus, in Inter's 4-2-3-1 setup, Gabriel struggled to play out wide and only scored a single goal in 10 appearances off the bench. While coaching stabilities added to the troubles, overall, the same confidence that he had during his time at Santos vanished with the lack of regular football and clashing heads with said coaching staff over his limited role. He was eventually loaned out to Benfica the following season, where he barely featured for the Portuguese Giants. He reportedly clashed with the coaching staff due to the frustration over his lack of playing time, and Portuguese reports suggested he didn't show the required patience and professionalism to earn a spot. Due to those circumstances, his loan was cut short by Benfica in January 2018 after just 165 minutes of playtime and 1 goal scored. Not long after that, Inter Milan loaned him back to Santos for the rest of 2018 and then to Flamengo in 2019. Gabriel Barbosa struggles to cope with the pressure of the move to Europe and the labels placed upon him in living up to the expectations of being the next great player out of Santos like Neymar were his eventual undoing. But it was not a bad ending to his story, as Gabigol did find his confidence and scoring touch again at Flamengo, where he became a fan favorite who delivered multiple championships and goals for the Rubro-Negro. The pressure on Gabriel Barbosa to become the next Brazilian superstar, whether from his compatriots in Brazil or European clubs like Inter Milan and Benfica, is something many young talents have faced, but few have felt it to the same extent as Gabigol's predecessor at Santos, Robinho, who was burdened with sky-high expectations from the very start of his career. After honing his skills in the futsal court at a young age, Robinho impressed in a trial for Santos at age 12 and entered their youth ranks. His dribbling abilities and acceleration were so impressive that the Santos and Brazilian national team legend Pelé picked Robinho as his heir apparent. He debuted in 2002 for the Peixe after signing his first professional contract and was a contributor to their first Campeonato Brasileiro title win since the time of Pelé. He continued to establish himself as Santos over the next 2 years, winning another Brazilian title in 2004 and helping Santos make it to the finals of the 2003 Copa Libertadores. His form had brought him to the attention of many European clubs in the summer of 2004, but Robinho remained with Santos after the Brazilian club rejected all offers. The fierce bidding war sparked among European giants like Real Madrid, Chelsea, and Bayern Munich raged on into the 2005 season, with the Spanish giants ultimately securing his signature in 2005 for 24 million euros. Thinking that they had their next great Brazilian, he was given the number 10 shirt for Real Madrid, previously worn by Luis Figo. However, despite moments of brilliance, Robinho struggled with consistency and the immense pressure of living up to his price tag. After all, it's one thing to be considered a Brazilian wonder kid, but when you are compared and anointed the heir of the king of football himself, nobody could handle that pressure, and Robinho proved as much as off-field issues, including clashes with managers and questions about his professionalism, further complicated his time in Europe. After 3 seasons at Real Madrid, he moved to Manchester City, where he started brightly but quickly faded, failing to replicate the heights he reached in Brazil. It was a similar situation at AC Milan, where he initially showed flashes of the talent that brought him to the dance, but his performances were often inconsistent, disappearing at moments where AC Milan needed him most, frustrating coaches and fans alike. By the time he left Europe in 2015, Robinho's career had become a story of unfulfilled potential, a reminder of how even the most gifted players can struggle to meet the demands of top-level football. Although Robinho isn't the only young player who failed to live up to expectations and has had his troubles with the law. Breno Borges, more simply known as Breno, broke through in São Paulo FC's youth system and eventually made his debut with the senior team at 17 years old. He played a total of 36 appearances across all competitions and became one of the key contributors in São Paulo's defense, as his size, strength, and agility helped them in winning the Brazilian Serie A title in 2007 and led him to being voted as one of the best defenders of the whole competition by Brazilian magazine Placar. Breno's outstanding debut campaign for São Paulo did attract the interest of various European powerhouses such as Real Madrid, Milan, Juventus, and Fiorentina, but Breno opted to take Bayern Munich's offer, as the Bavarians paid 12.3 million euros for him on a transfer fee based on the potential that they saw, and on the recommendation of one of their ex-forwards, Giovanni Elber, a former striker who had built a decent career for himself in Europe and whose best years were at Bayern prior to his retirement and becoming a scout for the club. His early days at Bayern had started off decently. He made his Bundesliga debut in March 2008 and his Champions League debut in the following season as his career continued to climb upwards. On top of that, Breno was part of Brazil's squad for the 2008 Beijing Olympics, helping his country to win a bronze medal. But outside of his time with the Brazilian Olympic team, he still hadn't gotten into Bayern's starting lineup, and that eventually led to a loan move to FC Nuremberg in December 2009, in what should have been a move to kickstart his career. Breno had a promising start to his time at the club and made 8 appearances, but unfortunately succumbed to a cruciate ligament injury, which ruled him out for 8 months. After his initial recovery, Breno managed to have the best portion of his Bayern Munich career. He became a starter under manager Luis van Gaal and played his role in helping the Bavarians to win a domestic double. Unfortunately, at the end of the 2010-2011 season, Breno again felt problems in his right knee and received the news that he would have to undergo surgery on it once again. Possibly due to fears of his career being over, compounded with it happening just as he was starting to find consistency after multiple years in Germany, Breno sunk into a spiral of depression and alcoholism during his recovery period. It's said those were the main factors that contributed to his rented villa burning down and the local fire department finding Breno drunk, holding 3 lighters in his hand. He was subsequently arrested, charged, and imprisoned for aggravated arson, which resulted in a prison sentence of 3 years and 9 months. From having it all to burning it all down within a matter of years, this was very much the end of Breno's career as a footballer in Europe. Although his story does have a light at the end of the darkness, as São Paulo FC signed Breno as a player for the 2013 season as a means to give their former player and his family security and stability in such trying times, and Bayern Munich also offered Breno a job as a trainer for their under-23 team under a work-release program, where he'd work 5 hours a day as an assistant coach for the under-23 team and return to Staudenheim prison each afternoon until the end of his sentence. Breno moved back to Brazil in the aftermath of his sentence and joined São Paulo once again as a player. His second spell with the club, however, wasn't as successful as the first. He only made a grand total of 13 appearances before being loaned to and then signing with Vasco da Gama, whom he eventually sued due to injuries he received at the club. He retired due to injuries in 2019 and has lived a fairly quiet life since his retirement. Injuries in football are far from uncommon, and while Breno's career was undoubtedly derailed by them, it was the legal issues that followed, stemming from his multiple knee surgeries and the arson case, that truly sealed his downfall. Yet, when it comes to Brazilian football's biggest what-if stories, none of them may be larger than the tale of Adriano Imperador. Adriano Leite Ribeiro was born in Rio de Janeiro's notorious Vila Cruzeiro favela, and he fought his way through poverty itself to start his career on Flamengo's youth system in 1991 as a 7-year-old, working his way through their ranks initially as a left-back before being moved to the striker position prior to his senior team debut for Flamengo in February 2000 in the Torneio Rio São Paulo, as a 16-year-old. At 6'2", he was strong, blisteringly quick, and technically brilliant, and it wouldn't be long until European scouts were drooling all over that and his cannon for a left foot that would famously earn him overpowered shooting statistics on Winning 11-10. Or Pro Evolution Soccer 6 for you North American and European weirdos out there. Adriano found the net 9 times in his breakthrough 2000-2001 campaign, while also becoming one of Brazil's youngest ever national debutants at 18, and scored 3 in his first 5 Brazilian Serie A appearances at the start of the following season. That was more than enough for Italian giants Inter Milan to secure Adriano's signing for the 2001-2002 season. He would debut in a friendly against Real Madrid at the Santiago Bernabéu and scored on a powerful free kick to give the Nerazzurri the victory. The goal, however, wasn't enough to keep him at the Milanese side, so he was loaned out to Fiorentina for the rest of that season, where he scored 6 goals in 15 games for La Viola. His brief yet impactful stint drew attention, and he moved to Parma for the 2002-2003 season as part of a co-ownership deal between Inter and Parma, and it was with Parma where Adriano truly flourished, forming a deadly partnership with Adrian Mutu and scoring an impressive 23 goals in 37 Serie A appearances during his 2 years with the club. Inter Milan moved quickly during the second half of the 2003-2004 season to re-sign Adriano for 23 million euros for sole ownership of his rights, tying him down to a 4-year contract in the process. Adriano became unstoppable towards the back end of the club's 2003-2004 season, as he scored 9 goals in 16 Serie A appearances, including a stunning final day brace against Empoli that was the birth of his moniker as L'Imperatore, the Emperor. His efforts in Italy got him called up to the Brazilian national team's 2004 Copa America squad, and with the tournament being one where most of Brazil's 2002 World Cup winning key members were given time off, Adriano took this opportunity to dominate the whole tournament, winning the Golden Boot as the competition's leading scorer with 7 goals, and scoring an equalizer against Argentina in stoppage time in the final, and being one of the penalty takers to score in order to bring Brazil its 7th Copa America title. A trophy in which Adriano dedicated to his father, Almir Leite Ribeiro, who had been his most ardent supporter since day one. 9 days after returning to Milan with the world at his feet, Adriano got a phone call from Brazil with the worst news any person who deeply loves their family could possibly receive. At 44 years old, his father had passed away due to a heart attack. Nothing was ever the same from that point. Even Adriano's prolific record season in the 2004-2005 campaign, with 28 goals and 42 appearances across all competitions, where he dedicated his goals to his late father by pointing to the sky in what became his new trademark celebration, didn't change the emotional baggage he was carrying deep down. It was simply all too much for him, and Adriano was struggling to cope. As he told various media outlets over the past few years, and even written about it himself in his book, his love for football was gone. He'd begun to turn to drinking and partying, anything to help numb the pain, to the point where he had started to show up to team practices completely intoxicated. By the start of the 2006-2007 season, Adriano was fighting a battle against addiction, falling out with Inter officials behind the scenes and missing games on a regular basis as he struggled to score at the same volume he did in previous years. It got to the point where Inter owner Massimo Moratti took the extreme measure to send Adriano on unpaid leave to his native Brazil in November 2007 in order to sort himself out. Adriano underwent an extensive physical and psychological rehabilitation program at São Paulo FC's training center and officially joined the club on loan that December. Adriano scored 11 goals in 11 outings for the Tricolor Paulista, but he continued to make headlines for his antics off the pitch by being seen at nightclubs and missing training sessions. After returning to Inter for a brief stint during 2009, the club opted to cancel Adriano's contract 1 year early, cutting their losses when he failed to return to Inter at the start of April after playing in World Cup qualifiers against Ecuador and Peru for Brazil. He returned to his alma mater in Flamengo for the 2009 season and had a short stint in Europe once again as AS Roma took a gamble by bringing him on as a free agent for the 2010-2011 season. But after multiple issues with his fitness, injury troubles, and missing a series of flights back to Italy along with failing to turning up for a medical after being allowed to return to Brazil to recover, Roma ended up releasing him a few days later, and with it, Adriano's time in Europe was over. Adriano bounced around in between clubs across Brazil and even in the United States in the aftermath of his European stints, but an Achilles tear in a training session during his time with Corinthians in 2011 was a key contributor to his eventual decline and official retirement in 2024. Even with his personal struggles, along with injuries taking away what could have been a legendary career and causing the biggest what-if scenario for a Brazilian prospect who made it all the way to Europe, the prime of Adriano Imperador is something which the streets will never, ever forget. So, what can we learn from these stories? The hype surrounding Brazilian Wonder Kids is often a double-edged sword. From the pressure of being labeled the next big thing, to the difficulties of adapting to a new culture, style of play, and even off-field struggles, there have been many Brazilians whose attempts to carve a career for themselves in Europe have fallen short of the massive expectations placed upon them, careers often being derailed before they even truly begin. Yet, we have also seen the opposite, where Brazilian players who have made it in Europe ended up becoming worldwide known superstars. as we've seen with players like Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo in recent years, along with the likes of Thiago Silva, Casemiro, Alisson Becker, Neymar, and of course, Ballon d'Or winners such as Kaká and Ronaldo Fenômeno. Along with the incredible skills that got them to this stage from their respective Brazilian clubs, their success can be attributed to a combination of adaptability, resilience, and strong support systems. Players like Ronaldo and Neymar dazzled with their flair, creativity, and goal-scoring prowess, while Kaká and Thiago Silva showcased intelligence and professionalism. Modern stars like Alisson, Vinicius Jr., and Rodrigo have benefited from patient development at clubs like Liverpool and Real Madrid respectively, proving that with the right environment, Brazilian talent can not only survive but thrive on the biggest stages in world football. However, that doesn't change the reality that the stories of Brazilian prospects in Europe have been and will continue to be a mixture of triumph, trials, and tribulations. Some falter under the weight of expectations and are forced to return home, others rise to become worldwide sensations and legends. It's all a reminder that talent alone is not enough. It takes the right mindset, support, opportunities, and a little bit of luck to turn potential into sustained greatness in one of the most hyper-competitive sports on the planet. As we look to the future, let's celebrate their successes, learn from their failures, and remember that every young player deserves the chance to write their own story, even if that story sometimes doesn't involve immediate success in football's biggest stages.